Where have all the men in church gone? Walk into most churches and you'll see women and children, but very few men. I'll tell you what, they didn't leave. The church made them unnecessary. Biblical masculinity has been treated like a problem instead of a responsibility. And the result is weak men, weak families, and weak churches. But here's the real question. How did this happen? I've been a pastor for almost a decade now, and I've watched this happen in real time. Our modern church has softened, suppressed, and reshaped men, and it's left it to the point where most men don't even feel comfortable coming to church. In fact, most children who grow up going to church start realizing that church is a place for women and children, not a place for men. Now, there's several reasons for that. First off is because in the church, we have prioritized emotion over truth. Take a listen to any of the worship songs or even the modern hymns that we sing in churches, pretty much anything that's been written over the past 100 years. And what you'll notice is emotion is prioritized over doctrine. Listen to the words that are prayed in the Sunday morning service or prayer meeting service. And what you notice is that experience is viewed as more important than truth. And go no farther than listen to the Sunday morning sermon. And what you realize is most of what the sermon is tailored to do is to provide comfort or maybe even excitement, but not conviction. Church may stir feelings, but it doesn't give men anything solid to build upon. Men need more than an emotional pick-me-up. They need truth and authority. Now, all this happens because our churches are focusing on catering to many groups of people except for men. In fact, often the core qualities that men possess are deemed within the church as dangerous or unhelpful. Just think of some of the qualities that men generally excel at, and you think if this fits in the church. Restrained violence. There's a time for restrained violence, for protecting in a physical way those people who you're entrusted with. Or how about righteous anger? When time calls for somebody to put their foot down and take a stand for righteousness. Or even in general, just dominion and leadership, exercising the right to rule and knowing how to do that and to lead people. These are some of the core qualities of masculinity, and yet, in our churches, these things are either put on the back burner or they're reinterpreted and softened in such a way so that they're basically benign and useless. Instead of discipling men in how to use their masculine qualities, the church has actually opted to try to transform men into something entirely different that God never created them to be. Men don't come to church because there's no authority in the church anymore. There's no reason to be there. According to the scriptures, God has appointed elders to be the leaders in the church. And yet, for most churches, it's not really the elders who lead the church. It's the people who lead it. It's those who have a vote and membership in the church, and they're the ones who dictate and determine where the church goes. Look, when members lead the church, then the church gets steered by those with the loudest voice and the most emotion, instead of the wise and sober decisions of those whom God has put in charge. When everyone leads, no one leads. And this is a sad predicament of most of our churches today. The issue isn't that men are broken. It's that the church has rejected God's design for men. To fix this, we have to recover something that modern Christianity hates: patriarchy. Now, patriarchy just means rule by fathers, but it refers to men leading in every sphere of authority that God has established on the earth, in government, in churches, and in homes. This idea of patriarchy doesn't flow from Western thought. It flows from the Holy Scriptures themselves. Now, patriarchy isn't domination. It is God's established rule. Authority represents the person's right to rule, but the responsibility and the burden of that rule are associated along with that. This we can see all the way back in the beginning of the Bible and throughout the whole thing, that God is always putting the responsibility and burden of leadership upon the man. God never faults the women for the state of the nation or the state of a church. He always faults the shepherds, the leaders, the elders. Now, this is true masculinity, not passive and soft, but leadership that is accountable to God. Patriarchy flows from God himself. In fact, all you have to do is take 2 seconds to look at what we know about God, and you realize that patriarchy is actually an attribute from God. You see, God is actually called our Father. He is the head patriarch over all things. When God made man in his image, he made them male and female. God is showing us, even when he created man, his own heart and his own mind. Notice that we call God a he. Now, that's not a slander against women, but it is an acknowledging of God's designed order. God is the head over all things, and he has appointed man as head over certain things. God is not depicted as a she, and he's not depicted neutral, but he is depicted in the masculine sense. This isn't arbitrary, but this is the nature of God. Masculinity isn't a social construct, it's God's divine order. And when we lose this in the church, we lose the very fabric of what it means to be human and to be a Christian. Look, when we forget this, there are grave consequences. The prophet Isaiah warned the nation of Israel that when they turned away from God, the curse would be that women and children would rule. And we can see the history of the nation of Israel that there were two queens who ruled in that nation, Jezebel and Athaliah. Both of them were wicked, and both of them led the country to destruction. God has appointed the man to rule, and when the man steps away from it, there are grave consequences. Now, the problem isn't just the church. The problem is also that we as men have accepted this. We've become passive as husbands, silent as fathers, and we avoid taking responsibility for our actions and for the places that God has commanded us and put us in charge over. It's hard to be a man these days. It's hard to demonstrate biblical masculinity because the world pushes back against it. And so the temptation that many of us have fallen to is that we give in. We give up the place of authority that God has called us to rule in. It's not just the church to blame for why it's empty, but it's men themselves. Look, the church cannot reject patriarchy and uphold biblical masculinity at the same time. If men don't lead, then somebody else will, and it won't be God's design. It's time to embrace biblical masculinity in the church and return to patriarchy again. Unless we do this, there won't be a future for our next generation. Men have got to step back up and lead their homes again, and the church has got to stop getting in the way. Men, this is the hour at hand, and we need to rise up. It's time to reject modern Christianity and embrace biblical masculinity. Take dominion where God has placed you. Look, if you enjoyed this video, leave a thumbs up and like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Everything I do on this channel is about reclaiming dominion in our homes, churches, and nations, all for God's glory.